I built a bridge on my own property, and the HOA tried to charge me $250 for it. Yeah, you heard that right. My land, my bridge, and somehow they thought they could fine me for crossing it. But what they didn't know was that bridge was about to burn their entire little empire down. Because when they tried to bully me, send letters, and threaten me with community penalties, I turned around and hit them with something they never saw coming. Proof, power, and payback. This isn't just a story about a bridge. It's about standing your ground when the HOA goes too far, when they forget where their borders end and your freedom begins. So grab your coffee, sit tight, and hit that like button, because you're about to hear how a $250 fine turned into the sweetest revenge I've ever had. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll know exactly why my neighbors still call it Karen's Crossing.
You ever have one of those weeks where you're just trying to live peacefully and someone has to make it their mission to ruin your calm? Yeah, that's been my life ever since moving into this so-called quiet community. See, my wife and I bought a small piece of land at the edge of an HOA neighborhood in the valley. The realtor had said, "Don't worry, you're technically outside of the HOA lines. You'll have peace and privacy." That was the selling point for me. I didn't want community barbecues, newsletters, or approved lawn colors. I wanted trees, fresh air, and the sound of the creek that ran right through my property. But that creek, oh man, that creek would become the reason I ended up in an all-out war with the HOA. The first few months were great. I'd wake up early, sip coffee on the porch, and watch deer drink from the stream. It was like living in a nature magazine. But when rainy season hit, that peaceful little stream turned into a miniature river. Our old wooden footbridge, the one the previous owner built years ago, finally gave out. One stormy night, I heard this loud crack outside, followed by the sound of wood smashing into rocks. The bridge had snapped clean in half and floated downstream. No big deal, I thought. I'll just build a new one, stronger, better. I mean, it was on my property. I didn't need anyone's permission for that. Right? So that weekend, I loaded up my truck with lumber, concrete mix, rebar, and a few tools. My buddy Greg came over to help me. He's a contractor who knows his way around a project like this. We spent the whole Saturday digging, measuring, and setting posts. It wasn't anything fancy, just a clean, safe bridge that could hold my ATV and maybe a small truck if needed. By Sunday evening, we were covered in mud and sawdust, but it looked amazing, solid as a rock. I stood there grinning like a proud dad, hands on my hips. "This thing's not going anywhere," I said. Greg nodded. "Looks good, man. You sure you're not part of that HOA circus over there?" I laughed. "Hell no, that's the best part. No rules, no fees, no drama." Or so I thought. Monday morning, I went out to take some photos of the finished bridge. I was thinking of posting before and after shots on my neighborhood app. But before I even got the chance, I noticed a shiny white SUV parked right at the edge of my driveway. On the side of it was a gold emblem with the letters Lakeshore Valley HOA. And standing beside it was a woman in a navy blazer, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Good morning," she called out, walking toward me like she owned the land. "I'm Patricia. I'm the head of the Lakeshore Valley Homeowners Association. I'm here about an unauthorized structure you've built." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She pointed toward my bridge. "That bridge wasn't there last week. You didn't submit a request for construction. That's a violation of Section 9C, unapproved alterations to community property." Now let me remind you, my property is outside the HOA. Not 1 inch of it is inside their boundary lines. I'd checked the plat map myself before signing the deed. So I said to her, "Ma'am, this isn't community property. This is my land. I built that bridge for my own use." Patricia frowned, glancing at her clipboard. "Actually, sir, this waterway connects to our retention system, which technically makes it part of our drainage infrastructure. Any construction over or near it must be approved by the HOA." I swear, I almost laughed. It was a natural creek, not a man-made drain, but she wasn't joking. "Look," I said calmly,
This creek's been here for decades. It's not in your system. And I built this bridge for my family, not your HOA. She tilted her head with that smug little smirk every power-hungry HOA president seems to have. Well, then you'll be happy to know it's a simple fix. You can submit a retroactive approval form along with a $250 assessment fee for unpermitted work. I took a deep breath. A fee? For my own bridge? Yes, she said sweetly, and until that's processed, you'll receive a non-compliance notice. If it remains unresolved, fines will accumulate weekly. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was trolling me. But she was dead serious. Lady, I said, this bridge isn't your concern. You've got no jurisdiction here. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You might want to double-check that, Mr. Mitchell. Our records show your lot sits on shared watershed land. If you don't comply, we'll escalate this. Then she turned, clicked her heels, and walked back to her SUV like she had just dropped a legal bomb. Now I was mad. Not just annoyed, furious. I went straight inside, pulled out my property documents, and found exactly what I expected. My parcel line clearly ended 10 feet past the creek. That bridge was entirely on my land. So I decided to call the HOA office myself. After a few transfers, I got some guy named Todd, their compliance officer. Yeah, Patricia's just doing her job, he said in that bored voice. If it's a structure over water, it falls under community code. I shot back. It's not your water. You can't charge me for something outside your authority. He sighed. Look, sir, we can't just take your word for it. Send us your property documents and we'll review it. But until then, the $250 fine stands. I was stunned. You were literally trying to find someone who isn't even part of your HOA. He chuckled. You'd be surprised how often people say that. Then he hung up. That's when I decided this wasn't going to end with me paying them a dime. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them one. Next day, I went to the county records office. I showed the clerk my deed and asked if the HOA had any claim over my property. She scanned her computer and shook her head. Nope, your parcel's private, outside all HOA jurisdiction. You're not subject to their rules at all. Can I get that in writing? I asked. She printed out a certified statement, stamped it, and handed it to me. I smiled. Perfect. When I got home, I scanned that paper and emailed it to the HOA office, CCing Patricia, Todd, and their legal contact. The subject line, proof of private property, no jurisdiction, cease and desist harassment. Within 10 minutes, Patricia replied. Her email was curt, professional, but dripping with irritation. Thank you for providing this documentation. We'll review and respond accordingly. Please note that any shared resource impact may still fall under HOA guidelines. Translation: she wasn't done. That evening, I was out cleaning up my tools near the bridge when I noticed something strange. Someone had stuck a bright orange notice onto one of my fence posts. In big, bold letters, it read, Stop Work Order, HOA Construction Violation. I tore it off immediately. She'd come back. I called Greg right then. You're not going to believe this, man. They just slapped a stop work order on my bridge. Greg laughed so hard I could hear his wife in the background asking what was so funny. Tell them to pound sand, he said. You're outside the HOA. That's trespassing. I nodded. Oh, I plan to. I'm calling the sheriff in the morning. Next morning, a deputy showed up. Young guy, probably mid-20s, polite but clearly tired of HOA drama. I showed him the notice, the property line map, and the email chain. He whistled low. Yeah, this happens more than you'd think. These HOA folks get a little, overzealous. So what can I do? I asked. He smiled. Well, you can press charges for trespassing if she came onto your land, or just have me give her a warning. I thought about it for a second. Let's start with a warning. So the deputy drove over to Patricia's house, which, of course, was right in the middle of the HOA neighborhood. Not even an hour later, she called me.
Her tone wasn't friendly anymore. "I can't believe you called the police on me," she snapped. "Actually, I called them on whoever trespassed and posted illegal notices on my fence. Turns out that was you." "You're making a mistake," she warned. "The HOA's legal team won't appreciate this." I grinned. "Good. Maybe they'll read the county zoning laws while they're at it." Then I hung up. For a week, things went quiet. No calls, no emails. I figured maybe, just maybe, they had realized they were wrong. But then, one morning, I walked outside and saw something that made my blood boil. Patricia, along with 2 HOA board members, was standing on my bridge, measuring it with tape, taking photos and jotting down notes. I stormed over. "Get off my property!" Patricia didn't even look up. "We're documenting structural concerns. This bridge crosses a shared natural resource." "Shared with who? The fish?" I snapped. "This isn't your jurisdiction, and you know it." One of the board guys mumbled, "Maybe we should go." But Patricia waved him off. "I'm within my rights," she said coolly. "You'll be hearing from our attorney soon." I pointed at her. "You step one more foot on my land without permission, and you'll be hearing from my attorney and the sheriff again." They finally left, but not before taking a dozen more photos. I stood there, shaking with anger. This wasn't just about a bridge anymore. It was about them thinking they could bully anyone, even someone outside their HOA, into submission. And I wasn't having it. So that night, I started planning my next move. If they wanted to play the legal game, I'd play it better. Because I had something they didn't. Actual law on my side. And before I was done, I was going to make sure that every single HOA board member regretted ever messing with me or my bridge.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Patricia's smug little grin and her clipboard flashing in the sun like some kind of bureaucratic sword. I wasn't going to let this drop. By morning, I had a full pot of coffee brewed, my laptop open, and 3 browser tabs filled with county property law, zoning regulations, and land use statutes. I might not be a lawyer, but I sure knew how to read. And by the time the sun came up, I had found more than enough proof that the HOA had absolutely zero jurisdiction over my creek, my bridge, or my dirt. Still, I wanted to hit them with something solid, so I decided to call in a professional. Around noon, I reached out to a local property rights attorney named David Keener. He'd handled a few HOA overreach cases before, the kind where board members thought they were running a mini-government instead of a neighborhood. I sent him every document I had, the deed, the HOA emails, the stop work notice, and the county verification. He called me back 20 minutes later. His first words, "Wow, these people don't quit, huh?" I laughed. "You have no idea." He continued, "You're in the clear 100%. They have no authority here, but they stepped on a legal landmine by coming onto your property and posting notices." "What kind of landmine?" I asked. "Civil trespass and harassment," he said. "If you want to go nuclear, I can draft a cease and desist with a warning letter, and we can involve the county inspector too, just to make things official." I grinned. "Do it." 2 days later, Patricia got her letter. Oh, and it wasn't some polite email either. David sent it via certified mail, printed on heavy white letterhead with his firm's name embossed at the top. You know, the kind that makes people nervous just holding it. It basically said, the HOA was unlawfully interfering with private property. They had no jurisdiction or authority. Any further trespassing would result in immediate legal action, and all damages, financial or otherwise, would be pursued in court. It was beautiful. I wish I could have seen her face when she opened it. But I didn't have to wait long to find out how she took it, because the very next morning she showed up at my property again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 SUVs pulled up right outside my fence. One was hers, and the other had the HOA's logo and the words Legal Counsel on the side. Out stepped Patricia, flanked by a tall man in a charcoal suit and sunglasses. He looked like he spent more time in air-conditioned conference rooms than anywhere near a creek. They stood there for a moment, just staring at the bridge. Then, Patricia spotted me walking down my driveway. She crossed her arms. "Morning, Mr. Mitchell. I see you've decided to escalate matters." "Morning," I replied calmly. "You're on camera, just so you know." That got her lawyer's attention. He looked up at the corner of my porch where the security cam was blinking red. Patricia straightened her blazer. "This is Mr. Lawson, our HOA legal representative. We received your attorney's letter, and we intend to dispute the claims." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Dispute what? My property line? My right to build a bridge? Mr. Lawson cleared his throat. "Our position is that the creek serves as a natural drainage feature shared by the HOA community. Your construction impacts the water flow, which means the association has standing to enforce compliance." "Impacts?" I said. "The water's running fine. Want me to build you a little dam just to prove it?" He didn't respond. Patricia just kept that smug expression plastered across her face. "Mr. Mitchell," Lawson continued, "if you'd like to avoid additional fees or court filings, I suggest you pay the $250 assessment and submit a retroactive approval. We can consider the matter resolved after that." I raised an eyebrow. "You're threatening court over $250? Patricia chimed in. "It's not about the money. It's about compliance and community standards." I took a slow step closer, enough for her to see the little smirk forming on my face. Funny thing about community standards, they only apply inside the community, and I'm not in yours. Then I handed her a copy of my county certification, laminated with the seal and date right on it. "This says otherwise, and unless you're with the county or holding a court order, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Patricia looked ready to explode. Mr. Lawson muttered, "We'll be in touch," and turned back toward the SUVs. "Please do. Oh, and next time, try knocking before trespassing." They drove off without another word. That weekend, I figured I'd earned some peace. So my wife and I invited a few friends over for a small barbecue by the creek. It was a beautiful Saturday. Blue sky, gentle wind, burgers on the grill. We were just laughing, talking, and enjoying the view from the bridge when I noticed someone standing on the far side with binoculars. Yep, it was Patricia. I sighed. "You've got to be kidding me." Greg, my buddy, looked over. "That the HOA lady again?" Yep. She was standing halfway behind a bush, pretending not to look our way, but every time I glanced up, she'd duck and whisper into her phone. Greg shook his head. "Man, she's obsessed." "You don't say," I muttered. About an hour later, a white pickup with a County Public Works decal rolled up. Out stepped a man in jeans and a khaki shirt, clipboard in hand. "Afternoon," he called out. "We got a report about unauthorized structural modification affecting stormwater flow." I exchanged a knowing look with Greg. "Let me guess. Anonymous report?" He grinned. "You got it."
The guy's name was Mark, and he turned out to be surprisingly cool. He inspected the bridge, took a few photos, and checked my deed records. "Everything looks solid," he said after 10 minutes. "Your bridge doesn't affect any county-managed waterways. It's private property and well-built, too." I handed him a soda. "Appreciate that, Mark. Sorry you had to come out for nothing." He shrugged. "Hey, happens all the time with these HOA types. They think they own every rock and tree within 5 miles. Then he winked. "Want to have a little fun?" I raised an eyebrow. What kind of fun?" "Well," he said, lowering his voice, "I can file a report stating that the HOA made a false claim and interfered with a county inspection. It'll go on record. Might make them think twice next time." I laughed. "Do it." He grinned. "Consider it done." A few days later, my attorney called. He sounded almost giddy. "Hey, you might want to check your mail. Something just came in from the county office." Sure enough, when I opened the envelope, there it was. A formal notice of county findings stating that my bridge was fully compliant, located on private property, and not subject to HOA regulation. And in bold print, right at the bottom, it said, "Any further interference or false reporting may result in fines against the reporting entity." I framed that letter right there on my living room wall. A week later, I decided to hang a small sign at the entrance to the bridge. It said, "Private property, no HOA access. Trespassers will be reported." And I added one little line underneath in smaller text. $25 fine for unauthorized crossing. Petty? Maybe. But satisfying? You bet. Greg nearly fell off his chair laughing when he saw it. "You're evil, man." "Hey," I said, "just following community standards." But of course, Patricia couldn't let it go. 2 days later, I got another letter. Not from the HOA this time, but from some environmental consulting firm. They claimed that my bridge may alter natural water flow patterns and disrupt ecological balance, and requested a site evaluation. I read the fine print, and there it was. At the bottom, in tiny text, "Commissioned by Lakeshore Valley Homeowners Association." They were seriously paying people to harass me now. So I forwarded the letter to my attorney, and he fired off a short reply. "All future communications regarding the Mitchell property will be directed through legal counsel. Unlawful interference, defamation, or false claims will result in litigation." That must have scared him, because a few days later, everything went quiet again. No binoculars, no letters, no lawyers. For the first time in weeks, I thought it might finally be over. Then came the twist. I was at the grocery store one morning when a neighbor from across the creek, a friendly older guy named Jim, stopped me in the parking lot. "Hey, you might want to know, they're holding an HOA meeting tonight. Your name's on the agenda." I froze. "My name?" "Yep," Jim said. "Something about unapproved infrastructure impacting community water resources. Thought you'd want to hear it from me." I thanked him, drove straight home, and called my lawyer. "Want to crash a meeting?" He laughed. "Absolutely." That evening, we walked into the HOA clubhouse like we owned the place. The room went dead silent. Patricia was sitting at the front table, flanked by her board members. Her eyes narrowed the second she saw me. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice dripping with annoyance, "you're not a member of this association." "True," I said, smiling. "But I heard you were talking about me, so I figured I'd attend." Her jaw tightened. "This is a private meeting." My lawyer stepped forward. "Then you might want to strike his name from your agenda. Unless you'd like to discuss private citizens in a public forum without consent. That's a privacy violation, by the way." The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia looked like she was about to combust. "We're simply addressing a matter that concerns the community." David, my lawyer, pulled out the county report and placed it on the table. "Then allow me to read from this official document. The bridge, constructed by Mr. Mitchell, lies entirely on private property and does not impact HOA jurisdiction. Any further discussion would be defamation." Silence. One of the board members whispered, "He's got a lawyer." Another coughed. Maybe we should move on to the next item?" Patricia's face went red. She slammed her pen down. "Fine, moving on." David turned to me with a grin. "Told you this would be fun." We left that meeting feeling victorious. For the first time, Patricia had no comeback, no clipboard, no fake rule to quote. Just silence. But I wasn't done. A few weeks later, I got a call from Mark, the county inspector. He said, "You'll love this. The HOA is under review for misuse of county complaint channels. Apparently, they filed 6 separate false reports about your property." 6? I asked, laughing. Over a bridge? "Yep," he said. "The county's thinking about issuing them a fine, maybe even a public reprimand." Now that was poetic justice. A month later, I got one last letter from the HOA. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was an apology. Sort of. It read, "Dear Mr. Mitchell, the Lakeshore Valley HOA acknowledges the findings of the county inspection and confirms that your property lies outside HOA boundaries. We regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred during prior communications. Regards, Lakeshore Valley Homeowners Association." No signature from Patricia, though. I later found out she'd stepped down due to personal stress. Yeah, right. That weekend, I hosted another barbecue. Bigger this time. Music, food, lights strung across the bridge. Greg raised a beer and said, "Here's to freedom and to making the HOA regret ever messing with you." Everyone laughed, and I smiled, watching the sunset reflect off the creek. That bridge wasn't just wood and steel anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is just knowing your rights and refusing to back down when someone thinks they can push you around. But as peaceful as things finally were, I had no idea the HOA still had one last card to play, and that they were about to take things to a level even the county hadn't seen before. Because next, they tried to buy my land.
You'd think after a public humiliation like that, Patricia and her HOA buddies would have learned their lesson. But if I've learned anything from living near an HOA, it's this. Those people never quit. They might retreat for a while, lick their wounds, pretend to make peace, but deep down, they're always plotting their next move. And sure enough, mine came wrapped in a nice little envelope 3 weeks later. It was a plain white letter with no return address, just a typed label with my name and the HOA's zip code. I opened it, expecting another complaint about my unsightly bridge, or maybe a passive-aggressive note about my no HOA access sign. But what I found was way stranger. It wasn't a fine. It wasn't a warning. It was an offer. "Dear Mr. Mitchell, the Lakeshore Valley Homeowners Association, in partnership with the County Development Committee, is exploring a new community enhancement initiative. We are offering to purchase your property at fair market value for inclusion in this project. Please respond within 14 days to discuss details. Sincerely, Lakeshore Valley HOA Board." I sat back in my chair and read it again. They wanted to buy my land. I actually laughed. These people had spent months harassing me, trespassing, filing fake complaints, and now they wanted to buy the same property they claimed was in violation. Not happening. That night, I called Greg. "You're not going to believe this," I said, reading him the letter over speakerphone. He snorted. "Let me guess, they offered fair market value, right? Which probably means half of what it's worth." "Exactly," I said. "It doesn't even make sense. Why would they want my land?" Greg paused. "Probably because of that creek, man. Remember what the county guy said. It runs parallel to their stormwater retention area. If they owned your side, they could expand it or build some fancy walking trail." That clicked immediately. They didn't want my land. They wanted control of that waterway, and they knew the bridge made it a perfect access point. So I called my attorney, David. He laughed even harder than Greg did. "They're trying to flip the script on you. If they can buy that property, they'll rezone it as common space, and your bridge will become their bridge." "Yeah, that's not happening," I said. "Don't worry, we'll shut it down before it starts. But I'll need to see exactly who's backing that community enhancement project. It smells like a setup." 2 days later, David called back sounding amused. "Guess who's listed as a private partner on that county project proposal?" "Don't tell me," I said. "Patricia?" Bingo. Even though she stepped down, she's still listed as a consultant.
They're trying to loop the HOA into a joint development to expand the lake access, and your land is smack in the middle of the design. I couldn't believe it. After all their legal defeats, they were now trying to use bureaucratic loopholes to take my property legally. So what do? I asked. David laughed even harder than Greg did. We make them regret it again. That weekend, he came over to my place. We walked along the creek, bridge gleaming in the afternoon sun, and he pointed to a few stakes someone had quietly hammered into the dirt. They've already started marking territory, he said. Sure enough, tiny orange flags with the HOA's initials printed on them. And the nerve of it, they'd done it without telling me. That was it. I'd had enough. You know what, I said, if they want to play games with land, let's play. Over the next week, David helped me file two powerful things. A private easement protection order officially registering my bridge as a personal use structure recognized by the county, and a no entry restriction on my property's parcel ID, which meant any entity, HOA or otherwise, needed written consent to enter or perform work there. Once that paperwork went through, I was bulletproof. And to make sure everyone knew it, I added another sign next to my bridge. Private easement registered. Entry without permission constitutes criminal trespass. That should have ended it. But of course, it didn't. A week later, I came home to find 2 county trucks and a bulldozer parked right beside my fence. A group of workers in reflective vests were unpacking surveying equipment. I marched over. Hey, what's going on here? One of them looked up from his clipboard. You Mr. Mitchell? Yeah. We're here for the preliminary survey. County project, trail expansion, and flood management improvements. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Did anyone tell you this is private property? He frowned. We have authorization from the Lakeshore Valley Homeowners Association. Wrong authorization, I snapped. You're 10 feet past their boundary line. He hesitated. Look, sir, I'm just following orders. I whipped out my phone and called David on the spot. He didn't even hesitate. Tell them to stop right now. I'm calling the county supervisor. And within 15 minutes, a black pickup pulled up, county seal on the door, and out stepped Mark, the same inspector who'd backed me before.
Mark walked straight up to the crew leader. Who authorized this? HOA board, the man said. We were told this parcel was pending transfer for development. Mark pulled out his tablet, scrolled, and looked up. This parcel belongs to Mr. Mitchell. It's protected under private easement. You're trespassing on private land. Pack it up. The look on that crew's faces was priceless. They immediately started gathering their equipment, muttering apologies as they loaded the trucks. Mark turned to me. They're pushing boundaries again, huh? Like weeds, I said. He smirked. Well, I'll make sure this gets documented. Might be time the county reviews that HOA's license to initiate public projects. Now that was music to my ears. That night, I decided to go one step further. If they wanted my land so bad, I was going to make it absolutely untouchable. I called Greg and said, Hey man, remember that idea we joked about? The bridge lighting? He laughed. You mean making it look like a mini landmark? Yeah, I said. Let's do it, but better. Over the next 2 weekends, we went all out. We installed solar lights along the handrails, added reinforced steel supports, and built a beautiful stone path leading up to it. I even mounted a small wooden plaque at the entrance that read, Mitchell Crossing, STD 2024, built by hand, protected by law. By the time we were done, it looked like something straight out of a national park brochure. Neighbors from across the creek started walking by, admiring it from their side. One woman called out, That's gorgeous. Wish our HOA built something that nice. I just smiled. Yeah, me too. But of course, Patricia couldn't stand that. Even resigned, she still showed up at every HOA event, whispering in the new president's ear, a guy named Howard who seemed quieter but every bit as power-hungry. One morning, I caught them standing on the far edge of the creek again. Howard had a folder in his hands, and Patricia was pointing at my bridge like a general planning an invasion. I walked up calmly. Can I help you folks? Howard cleared his throat. We're just reviewing the boundary line for a potential easement proposal. I already have your answer. It's a no. Patricia chimed in. You might want to reconsider. The HOA board is offering a substantial compensation package this time, above market value. I chuckled. You really think this is about money? She smiled tightly. Everything's about money, Mr. Mitchell. Eventually, everyone has a price. I stepped closer, looked her right in the eye, and said quietly, Yeah, but some people have principles. You might want to look that word up. Howard's face went pale. Patricia turned away in a huff. And that was the last straw for me. If they wanted to use paperwork to bully me, I was going to use paperwork to bury them. So I called David again. Time to go public, I told him. He laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next week, we filed a formal harassment complaint with the county's land management office, citing repeated interference, unauthorized entries, and false development claims. We also sent copies of every letter, photo, and report to the local newspaper and a small online blog that covered HOA abuse stories. Within 3 days, the headline hit. Local HOA accused of land grabbing and false claims against homeowner. It blew up. Hundreds of comments, people sharing their own HOA horror stories. And right there, front and center, was a photo of me standing proudly on my bridge, arms crossed, big grin on my face. The caption read, Homeowner fights back and wins. A few days later, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Of course, I wasn't invited, but my buddy Jim from across the creek filled me in afterwards. Apparently, the county had sent them a cease and desist letter for unauthorized project coordination. They'd also fined them $5,000 for filing false claims. And guess who took the biggest hit? Patricia, because her name was still on the original partnership documents. She'd been caught red-handed. Jim told me she stormed out of that meeting, yelling about lawsuits and slander, but everyone else just stared at her. The new president, Howard, apparently stood up afterward and said, We're done messing with that guy. About time. After that, things finally settled down. No more letters, no more lawyers, no more trucks. The HOA stopped patrolling the creek altogether. My neighbors started waving when they saw me. Even a few HOA members came by quietly to say, Hey man, you were right. She went too far. I'd won. Completely, legally, and publicly. But I wasn't finished writing my own ending. That summer, I threw a little community event, not HOA-sponsored, mine. I set up picnic tables, hung fairy lights across the trees, and placed a banner at the bridge entrance. Community barbecue, hosted by the non-HOA side. Dozens of neighbors came. Even folks from the HOA crossed the creek to join. And I let them, because I'm not petty. But I did make sure everyone saw that framed county report hanging on the side of the bridge post, the one that said, Private property, no HOA jurisdiction. A few people laughed. One guy even asked, So, you really beat the HOA, huh? I raised my drink. No, I just reminded them what the word private means. As the night went on, the lights shimmered off the water, kids ran across the bridge, and for the first time since moving here, I felt at peace. This little slice of land, my bridge, my creek, my cabin, it wasn't just home anymore. It was a victory monument, proof that you don't have to be rich or powerful to stand up for yourself, just persistent and a little stubborn. But I didn't know. Even as the music played and laughter filled the air, a new threat was already brewing quietly behind closed HOA doors. Because when people like Patricia lose power, they don't disappear. They plot. And the next scheme they cooked up wouldn't just threaten my bridge, it would threaten my whole property line.
When Karen got served those court papers, her face turned pale like she'd seen a ghost. She thought she could just bully me into submission, like every other neighbor she'd intimidated before.
But this time, she'd picked a fight with someone who actually knew how to fight back, legally and smartly. That morning, I stood on my front porch watching the chaos unfold across the road. HOA board members were gathered in a huddle, arguing about how to control the narrative. I could hear them shouting through the chilly air. "Mark, this is a PR disaster! Do something, the town's talking!" And then, like music to my ears, Karen yelling, "We need to countersue him before this blows up online." Yeah, Karen, go ahead, try. See, what she didn't know was that her HOA had made a massive mistake. They'd overstepped their legal boundaries by issuing fines and restrictions outside their designated community area. My land, my bridge, my right-of-way, all officially recognized on the county plat maps. And my lawyer? He was an absolute shark. We had a full 200-page binder of evidence, photos, recorded calls, HOA meeting transcripts, and the golden ticket, a signed letter from the county zoning department confirming the bridge was entirely outside HOA jurisdiction. So when we walked into that courtroom, Karen and her board came in acting all confident, smiling smugly like they already won. But when the judge looked over the paperwork, the smile on her face evaporated faster than water in a desert. "Let me get this straight," the judge said, flipping through the files. "Mr. Miller owns the property. The HOA has no jurisdiction over his land, and yet you fined him $250 and attempted to restrict access to his own driveway?" Karen tried to play it cool. "Well, Your Honor, the bridge he built connects directly to our community road, and it affects—" The judge cut her off mid-sentence. "Ma'am, the road in question was built on county property. That's a public right-of-way, not private HOA infrastructure." You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's lawyer stammered, trying to recover, but the damage was done. The judge leaned back, gave Karen a long, disappointed look, and said, "This seems like a clear abuse of authority. You can't fine someone for something that isn't yours to control." And just like that, my $250 fine was officially voided, and the HOA was slapped with a cease and desist order. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, this wasn't just about $250 anymore. It was about principle. That HOA had harassed me, trespassed on my property, sent threatening letters, and even tried to dig around the edge of my land, claiming they were checking drainage compliance. It was months of unnecessary drama. So, I filed a counterclaim: harassment, property interference, and defamation. When they realized I was serious, the HOA's lawyer tried to settle quietly out of court, but I told my attorney, nope, we go all the way. Because I wanted this to be a message that you can't bully someone just because you have a fancy HOA title and think you're the sheriff of the neighborhood. The trial dragged on for weeks. The local paper even picked up the story. Headline: Homeowner fights back against HOA overreach and wins support from locals. People started coming by just to see the famous bridge. Kids would wave from their bikes. Some neighbors even stopped by with baked goods saying, "We're rooting for you, man." For once, the community wasn't behind the HOA. They were behind me. Karen, on the other hand, was losing it. She tried to rally support by holding a special emergency HOA meeting. I heard she stood up there red-faced, ranting about how I was destroying neighborhood unity and setting a bad precedent. But fewer than half the members showed up. People were tired of her control, and one by one, they started resigning from the board.
When the final court date came, I could tell Karen was already defeated. She looked tired, her eyes heavy, clutching a folder like it could save her from what was about to happen. My lawyer stood up and calmly presented everything: evidence of trespassing, unauthorized HOA fines, photos of HOA members entering my property without consent, audio clips of Karen threatening community penalties. The judge didn't take long to decide. He ruled in my favor. Full compensation for legal fees, emotional distress, and property interference damages. The total? Just under $38,000. Karen gasped. The room went silent. And when the judge added, the HOA must issue a written apology and remove all records of the false fines, Karen's jaw nearly hit the floor. After court, I walked out into the sunlight, feeling 10 pounds lighter. The bridge, the one they tried to fine me for, stood tall and proud over the creek, a symbol of peace and victory. Birds perched on the railings, the water below shimmered in the afternoon sun. A few neighbors clapped when I got home. "Hey, congrats, man! About time someone put that HOA in its place." Even the mailman gave me a thumbs up as he drove by. I decided right then I was going to make this bridge even more special. So I hung a custom-made wooden sign on the side that read, "Karen's Crossing, paid for by HOA Drama." It became a bit of a local landmark after that. Months later, the HOA was in shambles. Karen had stepped down for personal reasons. A new board took over, calmer, fairer, actually decent people. They even invited me to one of their meetings just to say sorry for what happened before. I accepted, mostly out of curiosity. When I walked in, the new president smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Miller, we owe you an apology. The last administration made mistakes." I just nodded. As long as we all stay on our own sides of the fence, we'll be fine. Everyone laughed. The tension that had hung over our neighborhood for months was finally gone. But here's the best part. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the county. They wanted to feature my bridge in a local infrastructure showcase because of its innovative private construction supporting community access. So the very same structure the HOA had tried to fine me for ended up winning an award. When that happened, Karen couldn't even show her face at the grocery store. Word spread fast. People were joking that I should charge the HOA for photo rights every time someone crossed it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, I stood on my bridge with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the reflection of the sky ripple on the water. It wasn't just about the win. It was about standing up for myself. Because sometimes you've got to remind people that just because they have a rule book doesn't mean they can rewrite your life. I thought about everything, the noise, the fights, the letters, the courtrooms, and smiled. Peace. Finally. A few months later, a moving truck showed up at Karen's old house. She'd sold it and left the neighborhood for good. As the truck pulled away, I couldn't help but chuckle, because the last thing I saw hanging in her empty front yard was a for sale sign, right next to a small handwritten note taped to it that said, "Beware of bridges." And that, my friends, is how a $250 fine turned into the most satisfying victory of my life. So the next time an HOA thinks they can push you around, just remember, knowledge is power. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Because sometimes the best revenge is building a bridge and watching them pay the toll. If you enjoyed this wild HOA showdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more crazy real-life stories like this. Trust me, we've got plenty more where this came from. Stay smart, stay strong, and always build your own bridge, literally or metaphorically.